Thank you. Thank you so much, Pastor John, for having me here, Pastor Michelle, especially on Mission Weekend. And as we think about mission, and I think that's what the focus is for you this weekend, I think it's important to recognize that as people of faith, as members of the body of Christ, as members of God's family, we have a very specific mission. We have a very specific calling, not just to our own families, but we have a mission and a calling to those who don't have families in the community around us. So you can see behind me, this is a picture of my family. And you're not seeing double. I do have 6 little boys. So you can see that family is really important to me. I really do love children. And I want to tell you this, and this is a professionally taken photograph. But I'm going to talk about family, and not because I have a perfect family or I've had a perfect experience growing up here in Hong Kong. In fact, my family is like any other family, probably like your families. We've experienced tragedy and hardship and pain, but the reality is I've been able to walk through all of those things in my life because I know what it's like to grow up in a loving family. And not just with my own family, my 6 younger brothers and sisters and my parents, but I was raised in the church here in Hong Kong. And I really experienced what it means to have spiritual mothers and fathers, spiritual aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters and cousins. In fact, there's quite a few of them in the room here today, which I didn't expect, but they continue to support me. I probably met Pastor John when I was 11 or 12. Yeah, so I was so thrilled actually to see the Titus High School program because he knew me when I was a not very obedient member of our own church high school program. But the church family helped to raise me and continue to invest in me as I raise my own children. And the amazing thing is that the God that we serve is a really good Father. And He is the author and the designer of family. And so family is really important to Him too. In fact, the Bible tells us that God is the father to the fatherless. He's the defender of widows, and He sets the lonely, even the lonely who are here in this room today, He sets the lonely in family. And I believe that part of our mission and our calling as the church is to be family for those who are lonely. And I believe that when we rise up and answer that calling, when we respond to what God is telling us to do, we are going to see brokenness restored. We are going to see the lives of children and families right here in the city of Hong Kong changed. I believe that we'll see the culture of Hong Kong transformed. And in doing so, I believe that we ourselves will be transformed in the process. Now, I know those are all good words, right? And we've probably all read this scripture, but how real is it to us, actually? So rather than expounding on the Bible more, I want to tell you a story of a young friend of mine. She's living with us right now, and I got to have coffee with her earlier this week, a couple of days ago, and I asked her if it would be okay with her if I shared her story with you. And I've changed her name. This isn't her name, but I'm sharing all of this with you with her permission. okay? I'm going to call her Summer, and I want to tell you Summer's life story. Summer was born to a teenage mom who didn't have any community support. Her mom was really struggling with drugs, which many troubled young people who do not have family support do. And when she fell pregnant and delivered Summer, her baby was put immediately into the residential care system. Her mother actually then went on to have 7 more children. Her mom, by the way, is younger than I am. Her mom went on to have 7 more children, so she has a total of 8 children now, all with different fathers. Every single one of them was put into the residential care system here in Hong Kong immediately from birth. Now, a couple of Summer's siblings had a social worker who really fought for them and who understood the concept of adoption, which most people in Hong Kong don't. So a couple of her siblings actually were able to be adopted. But most of them have spent their entire childhoods and are still there in orphanages and foster families across the city of Hong Kong. Summer actually started out in a foster home, and her next sister was placed there with her. But after it was discovered that the foster parents were terribly abusing them, they were removed from their foster family, and they were put in a large orphanage here on Hong Kong side. Now, Summer stayed in that orphanage until she was 15, when as her behavior was more challenging because she never got to go home and visit family. She never had anybody there for her. Eventually at 15, they took her out of that orphanage and they placed her into a boarding school. But what that really means is like a girl's prison. She was diagnosed from an early age with ADHD and with ODD, which is oppositional defiant disorder, and she really struggled. She had been moved around, and she struggled, especially actually with controlling her anger. She told me that the few times that her mom did come to visit her, which would maybe be once a year, even in primary school, her mom would try to steal her food and her pocket money. So Summer really didn't have anybody, and it was, she really struggled. But despite all of the challenges, actually, Summer's a really pretty young girl. She's really smart and actually very athletic. Through the orphanage that she'd been raised in, she'd had the opportunity to do rugby training at the football club. So she was actually a great rugby player and ended up playing for one of the Hong Kong rugby teams. But when she was 17 years old, she fell pregnant. She was suspended from school. She couldn't stay in her boarding school anymore. And eventually she had to drop out because she needed to take care of her young daughter, especially because right around the time of her daughter's birth, her boyfriend, the father, was sentenced to a very long prison sentence where he still is today. So here's Summer, 17 years old. She's never had parents. She's never had a family. And now she has a little girl. Well, she's struggled alone for the last couple of years. And then earlier this year, she's 19 years old, she fell pregnant again. Now, thankfully, even though Summer was so vulnerable and lonely, she'd had a positive interaction with Mother's Choice before, and so she reached out to call us. She asked if she could be admitted into our refuge, into our hostel, because she literally had no other place to go. It's been amazing to me to see Summer start to thrive, learn how to trust another adult. And I got to tell you, she's 19 now, but she's still very much a little girl. and it's like having a 12 or 13-year-old staying with you. She's learning how to trust. She's starting to relax. She's really loved being with the house mothers and in a family-like environment, and it's been easier for her to control her anger. But a couple of months ago when her baby was born, she realized there was just no way that she could take care of her baby. She knew she wanted to give birth to the baby, but she just realized, I don't even know how I'm going to take care of myself and my 2-year-old. And so she made what I think is just an incredibly courageous decision to place her baby for adoption. Now, Summer's actually still living with us. And that's because there is not one single other human being in Hong Kong, not one friend, not one family member, not one acquaintance who can help her. So we've been doing our best, basic things. We helped her learn how to apply for a job, and she's got a part-time job, but she actually didn't know how to open a bank account. So we had to help her open a bank account, teaching her really basic life skills like how to cook and how to take care of herself and how to get around. And she's, things are looking up for her. She's going to have a really hard road ahead, taking care of herself, a young girl, and her 2-year-old. But she's working hard, and she's saving. She's hoping that she can get a safe place for her and her daughter, and she's starting to heal from some of the truly horrific childhood trauma that she's been through. And, she still faces a lot of fear and uncertainty about her future. And I'm telling you Summer's story today, even though Summer's journey isn't over, because Summer's story is not unique. Although Hong Kong is one of the most beautiful, modern, and affluent cities in the world, so when I drove in today to come here for the service, I looked across the harbor and I just thought, wow, we live in a beautiful, beautiful city. But the reality is, 1 in 5 children in Hong Kong lives in poverty. That means they go to bed without having had 3 meals in the day. There are tens of thousands of children in Hong Kong who have been exposed to child abuse, child neglect, and abandonment. Many of them are living in risky and dangerous living situations, and oftentimes it's because their parents, they're not necessarily bad people, but they're people who are really isolated. They don't have extended family support, they don't have community support, and they're really struggling, and so their children are at risk. And the most vulnerable of those tens of thousands of children across Hong Kong are those children who are like Summer, okay? Those who are not living with their family. They don't have a safe, loving, permanent family, and their parents are in prison, or their parents are on drugs, or their parents are struggling with some kind of relational or family or job crisis. And so those parents place children like Summer into the residential care system in Hong Kong, or their children are removed from them. And these children are living actually all across the city, even near where you live. And they're in foster families, they're in orphanages, they're in small group homes, they're in boys and girls homes like the one that Summer was in. And I believe that it's those institutionalized children who've been in institutionalized care that we are called to, because they are the most vulnerable in the city. So how many of those children are there? Well, there are about 4,000 children living in full-time institutionalized care in Hong Kong, from newborn to 18 years old. And that's not because there's only 4,000 children that need care. That's because that's the only number of beds that are available. On any given day across the city, on any day, okay, there's at least 400 children on the wait list waiting to get in. Those children will wait for months, either in hospitals, taking up hospital beds, or staying in a dangerous or abusive situation, and many of them actually never get off the wait list, and they stay in an uncertain situation. And I think most alarming for me is that for those who do get a placement in residential care in Hong Kong, it's very likely that they'll spend years and years in the system. So although 90% of those 4,000 children that are in care have a plan for family reunion, meaning the plan is not for them to be adopted. The plan is for them to go back to their birth families, their mom and their dad. The sad reality is that almost half of those cases will never be reunited with their families, and they will stay in care until they're 18. The other half usually spend years before they go back to their parents. I think part of it is that our system and our community don't support vulnerable and struggling families to be able to bring their children back home. And yet, on the flip side, we have all these kids waiting, but in our culture, we don't really understand or believe in adoption. And that's because I think across Hong Kong, most of us, we define family only by blood. And there's a belief, and I need to confront us in the church, because I think there's a belief that's also held by many people in the church in Hong Kong, that because children are growing up in an institution, because they have a roof over their head, they have 3 meals to eat, they have a subsidy to go to school, hey, they're doing okay, they're better off than many children, right? Because of that belief, that resistance to adoption, lack of support for birth families, and thinking children, they're safe because they've got a roof over their head, kids stay stuck in institutionalized care. And I need to tell you why that's concerning. Because there is no institution, there is no orphanage, there is no small group home, there's no foster family even, who can match the love or the care and the attention that a permanent, safe, loving family can offer. And there's a spiritual reason for that too. It's because God is a relational God, okay? He intended for children, every child, to be raised in a family. And he intended every single family to be supported by the community. There is no family who can do it by themselves, right? But the challenge is children in our city, thousands of children in our city, are growing up without a family. Our community is not supporting struggling families, and so we see kids spending years and years in care. And the problem with children spending years and years in care is that, and there's reason, this is global research, not just in Hong Kong, when children stay in care, the more years they stay in care, the longer they're there, the more likely they are to have both physical and mental health problems. They're more likely to drop out of school early. They are more likely to do drugs. They are more likely, especially if they're a boy, to end up in prison. In fact, it's something like almost 80% of men in prison in the United States grew up in foster care. So it's not just Hong Kong, okay? And if they are a girl, they are astronomically more likely to get pregnant between the ages of 12 and 18. A big challenge I always have is that people say to me, oh, these girls who come to Mother's Choice who are pregnant, they must be really bad girls. They must be really naughty girls. They've made bad choices. And I want to say to them, they are children who've grown up without loving families, and they are vulnerable, and we should be protecting them. So you can see it's a vicious cycle, right? My youngest child is 7 months old, and I regularly meet grandparents who are younger than I am. So this is a vicious cycle, and I want to ask the question this evening, what if Summer had a family? What if somebody had supported Summer's mom when she fell pregnant as a teenager and helped her to get off of drugs and helped her to raise her child? Or if that hadn't been possible, what if the people who were in charge of Summer when she was a newborn baby had believed in adoption, and she'd been given the chance to be raised in a loving family, maybe a family like the ones here at this church, would her life have been different? Would she have made different choices? Would she be a different person if she'd been raised with a mom and a dad who saw her potential, who believed in her, and who prepared her for life? I believe that Summer's life would look very different. And that's because God designed something that I believe is the most powerful agent of change in the world, and that is family. God designed us for family. In fact, when we accepted Christ, we became members of God's family. Romans 8 tells us that we were adopted. We ourselves are adopted into God's family. That's what makes us his children. We are legal heirs. We are permanently adopted. We are legal heirs alongside Christ. Next month, November is Adoption Awareness Month, celebrated around the world. But because of the traditional mindset of many in our city, there's a great sense of shame and secrecy that surrounds the topic of adoption. That we have a lot of cultural stigmas. There's beliefs that adoption is second best, that a family could really only love somebody that's their blood relation. And there are many who believe that to place a child for adoption is cruel. And so the result of all of that is there are many children who are waiting for adoption. Even though most kids aren't released for adoption, there are some who are. There's about 80 who are on the wait list right now in Hong Kong. And even though there are families who want to adopt in Hong Kong, they don't want to adopt the children who are waiting. Very, very few are willing, and that's because about half of the children who are waiting are over the age of 3. They've been through the trauma of moving around and through different placements. And the other half, even though they're younger and there's more families willing to adopt younger children, they might have special needs or complex backgrounds like Summer's. They may have been exposed to drugs in utero. Their parents may have had mental health issues or other physical health issues. And so there's just no families who are willing to step up and to adopt them. But here's the truth I want to speak out today over you. Every child is special. And even though these children I'm telling you about are vulnerable, they are so, so valuable. They deserve to have a safe, loving, and permanent family. And I also want to tell you this. Every family is unique. It's love and commitment, not blood, that makes a family. And I also tell you this. Families need support. I can't raise my children by myself. I told you there's spiritual sisters and aunts and uncles in this room who helped me to raise my children. We all need community. We all need people to support us. So everybody in this community and in this church has a role to play in supporting family. And these truths that I share with you, I believe it's at the very heart of the gospel. And that's because God loved us so much. He loved us so much that he adopted us into his family. And it's his heart to see the lonely in family. And that's what challenges us to care for the widow and the orphan. And so I want to challenge you today because I believe that those children who are languishing in institutional care across our city without a family, children like Summer, they are our modern day orphans in Hong Kong. And I believe that Summer's mom, and now Summer herself as a single mom, raising her older daughter on her own, they are our modern day widows. And it is our mission and all of our responsibility to respond. So what can you do? I know it's really scary to think about getting involved. I know you guys are a young congregation, and some of you may not even be married yet, and you think, oh, what can I do? It's easier for everybody, I think, to think, this is the government's problem, right? Let's just leave this to the government. I got to tell you something. There is no government on the planet that can replace the love and authentic relationship that you find in a family. It can't replace community. And that is what the families and people in this church can provide. You can provide genuine relationship. And there are thousands of children across our city and thousands of families in crisis who are suffering and who are longing to be in relationship, who are longing for somebody to love them and to walk alongside them. Okay, so some practical things about what you can do. The first thing that you can do is you can pray. I always ask myself, what if people of faith and our churches stepped forward to pray? Not just for a moment, but prayed really intentionally and purposefully with commitment for children without families in our community. What if you went home tonight and you prayed with your own family and you asked God, what's our mission as a family? How can we respond? I wonder what would have happened in Summer's life if there had been a family or somebody who stepped up and said, I'm going to fast and pray for you for 30 days. I wonder what could have happened. I mean, I also want to suggest something else. What if you step forward to support children and families in crisis just by building friendship with them, by being in relationship with them? What if you supported young birth parents, teen moms, or single moms? And I know you probably think you don't know anybody like that. You don't know anybody like Summer that feels far away from your life. Well, I'll tell you that there are moms and dads and children and young people who are struggling in this very congregation. There are people who are having a really hard time and not sure that they can face their trials alone. So open your eyes, even today as you're leaving, and ask God, is there somebody who's lonely that I can befriend, that I can be family to? Because when we as people of faith decide to meet the desperate need of children in our city, I just think, I told you there were 400 children on the wait list today. Oh, that's not that many families. What if we in the church decided that we wanted to meet that desperate need for foster families? What if we said, I could foster a child. I'd be open to it. What if Summer, when she was younger, had been with a loving family, a family that prayed for her, that brought her to church even, that fought for her, that were a voice for her? And I think, what if there are people in this congregation that would even consider building their family through adoption? What if they think that there's somebody that they could love? I'm just telling you that there are so many children, and I think when you ask God what you can do, and you respond, even in a small way, you can make a difference. So I want to close by telling you this. We said that we're no longer slaves to fear. And I want to tell you not to be afraid. Because it's time for us as the church to step in, to respond to God's calling. You can pray. You can support struggling families or children or young people, even here in your own congregation. And I bet there's even people here who could be amazing foster families or even adopt. So as you think about it, ask God to open your heart. And I want to tell you that we need you, because we need all of you. So I'll leave you with this.
It takes teachers and mentors, passing their wisdom to the next generation. It takes strong shoulders and pockets full of tissues in times of crisis. It takes carers awake in the night, keeping watch over a sick child. And it takes single parents who must be everything. It takes the brave who stare down their fears to make difficult decisions. It takes givers who let go of a piece of themselves so that a new family might be complete. And it takes those who walk beside them, sharing their load. It takes the honest who have hard conversations, no matter how difficult it gets. It takes comforters whose strong arms hold crying babies waiting for a home. And it takes the determined who won't rest until every child is in a family. It takes new parents embarking on a bold adventure. And it takes those that see the potential in every child. It takes those who open their arms again and again to be a temporary family. And it takes those who open their hearts to be a forever family. Sometimes it takes the family you're born into, and sometimes the family you'd never have imagined. It takes mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters of all kinds. It takes us all.